The Olympic host nation, Japan, picks up its first medals, a gold and a silver in the judo men's and women's categories. That was after Ecuador's Richard Carapaz won the gold in the men's cycling road race, making it the country's second ever gold at a Summer Olympics. In other news, tackling Britain's pingdemic, hundreds more COVID testing sites will be set up across England to ensure essential workers can avoid self-isolation and keep working. There's a frantic search for survivors in India as relentless rains trigger severe floods and landslides in the state of Maharashtra. At least 135 people are already known to have died. President Biden warns the US is facing a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Tokyo now and the pandemic looming large over the start of the Olympic Games. The first women's beach volleyball match canceled due to a positive COVID test. Still, the events are getting underway. Team USA not medaling on day one, but good news for men's gymnastics qualifying for the team finals. And women's soccer making up for that surprise loss with a big win over New Zealand 6-1. ABC's James Longman is right there in Tokyo.
Tonight, COVID continuing to impact the Tokyo Olympics as the first full day of the Games got underway. The first scheduled match for women's beach volleyball cancelled after the Czech team had to withdraw because of a positive test. New COVID cases in the Olympics rising yet again overnight to at least 127. One person testing positive in the Olympic Village, though officials say it's not an athlete. New cases also up 133% in the city of Tokyo over the last 7 days, doing nothing to ease concerns across Japan that these games are causing a health emergency. This coming as the IOC issued a stern warning about breaches to COVID protocol after some athletes and officials were seen at the opening ceremony without masks. Still, despite the risks, the game's in full swing. The US men's gymnastic team advancing to the finals, landing in 4th place behind Japan, China and Russia. No fans, of course, but the squad had Simone Biles and the other US women gymnasts to make up for it, cheering their support from the stands. Sam Mikulak hoping to lead the young team to its first medal since 2008. Teammate Brodie Malone, a first-time Olympian, saying before the event that the year-long delay to the Games gave him more time to prepare.
It definitely helped me, for sure. Having the year off just really gave me the time to get more numbers under my belt and get more confident.
And a decision by the US women's soccer team to skip the opening ceremony for practice appearing to pay off. Megan Rapinoe and the team bouncing back from that surprise loss to Sweden to dominate New Zealand 6-1. First Lady Jill Biden attending that match, and Biden also joining French President Emmanuel Macron to take in a 3-on-3 basketball game, making its Olympic debut. While the United States ended the day disappointingly with 0 medals, it was China who earned the distinction of being first to claim gold. Shooter Yang Chen taking first place in the women's 10-meter air rifle event, the 21-year-old putting the medal on herself because of COVID protocols.
Those medal ceremonies very different this time around. James Longman with us from Tokyo. And James, it's not just the pandemic, but we've been watching an approaching tropical storm, and now it's expected to actually impact some of the events.
Yeah, that's right, Whit. The rowing has actually been moved up a day because of this storm. It's not clear what other events could be impacted, but the surfers who are participating in their first Olympic Games, they say they welcome the possibility of bigger waves. Whit.
All right, James, thank you.
We begin this hour with the Tokyo Olympics. Japanese judoka Takato Naohisa has won gold in the men's 60-kilogram category. It's the host country's first gold medal at the Games. The 28-year-old beat Taiwan's Yang Yongwei in the final. Takato previously won the bronze in 2016. He said this time he was able to go all the way because of the unwavering support of those around him. He added that he would try to continue to get better even as champion. Meanwhile, in the women's 48-kilogram category, Tonaki Funa won silver, finishing second to Kosovo's Distria Krasnic. Tonaki said that her weaknesses emerged at the worst possible moment. The 25-year-old had beaten two-time world champion Ukraine's Daria Bilodid in the semifinal to earn a shot at the gold. Meanwhile, Japanese swimming star Ikee Rikako competed in her first event at the Games. She was a member of the women's 400-meter freestyle relay team, which failed to progress past its qualifying heat. The 21-year-old's Olympic dreams were seemingly dashed by a leukemia diagnosis in February 2019, but she recovered and returned to competition last summer. The youngest athlete at this summer's games was also in action. 12-year-old Hen Zaza is a table tennis player from Syria and was her country's flag bearer at the opening ceremony. On Saturday, she took on an opponent 27 years her senior. Hen Zaza has only known life under her country's decade-long civil war. Training under these conditions has been tough, and her practice sessions are often cut short by power outages. She ended up losing her first qualifying match on Saturday, but said that she hoped her performance would encourage children around the world to fight for their dreams. Hen Zaza's compatriot Yusra Mardini was also in action on Saturday, but she was competing for a different flag. The 23-year-old represents the refugee team and took part in qualifying for the women's 100-meter butterfly. The German-based swimmer fled Syria in 2015, making the dangerous trip across the Aegean Sea on a boat. A year later, she competed in the Rio Games as one of the first members of the refugee team. On Saturday, she finished last in her heat. Meanwhile, the International Judo Federation has temporarily suspended an Algerian judoka and his coach. Fatih Nurdin reportedly withdrew from the competition to avoid potentially facing an Israeli opponent. The Algerian Olympic Committee says it has taken away the duo's accreditation and plans to send them home. Olympic-related coronavirus cases are on the rise just one day after the opening ceremony. Officials have confirmed the first positive test among athletes who already competed in an event. Dutch rower Finn Florijn raced in the men's single sculls heat on Friday. The Royal Dutch Rowing Federation says he has now entered quarantine and will no longer participate. Organizers say they have confirmed 123 cases related to the Games since July 1st. This figure includes competing athletes. The IOC is warning athletes to observe face mask protocols, saying some failed to wear them during the opening ceremony on Friday. The Games executive director says penalties may apply to those breaching preventative measures. Organizers have also had a tough time ensuring that spectators stay away from events. In cycling, crowds of spectators line the public portions of the men's road race course. The riders will cover 224 kilometers, starting from Tokyo and finishing near Mount Fuji. The Tokyo metropolitan government confirmed over 1,100 new cases of infection on Saturday. This marks the fifth straight day that the total has been in the 4 digits. Turning to China, where Beijing has imposed counter-sanctions on U.S. individuals in response to recent U.S. sanctions on Chinese officials in Hong Kong. China's foreign ministry said on Friday that those subject to the measures include former U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross and a former representative of the Congressional Executive Commission on China. The ministry says China's sanctions are based on its anti-foreign sanctions law, which took effect last month. The law was drafted to retaliate against sanctions imposed by some Western nations over human rights issues in Hong Kong and the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. This is believed to be the first case in which China has applied the law. The counter-sanctions followed the announcement by U.S. President Joe Biden's administration on July 16th that it would impose sanctions on 7 deputy directors of China's Hong Kong liaison office. The U.S. said the officials had undermined Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy. The Biden administration also issued an advisory on July 16th to warn companies about doing business in Hong Kong. The advisory says companies could face surveillance that threatens their corporate secrets. It warns China may force firms to give up information about their operations and customers. The administration of U.S. President Biden says Secretary of State Antony Blinken will visit India next week. Blinken will meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the country's External Affairs Minister in New Delhi on Wednesday. They will discuss a wide range of issues, including Indo-Pacific engagement, regional security, and COVID-19 response efforts. The officials are also expected to discuss preparations for the first in-person summit of leaders from Australia, India, Japan, and the U.S., a grouping known as the Quad. The Biden administration sees the Quad as a group that can counter China's growing influence in the region. A senior U.S. official said Afghanistan will also be on the agenda. The Biden administration is expected to urge India to help provide stability in the region. India has been seeking to increase its presence in Afghanistan with its neighbor and rival Pakistan in mind. Environment ministers from the group of 20 nations have ended talks without an agreement on specific measures to combat climate change. The discussions were seen as an important step ahead of the United Nations climate talks known as COP26 in November. The two-day meeting was held in Naples, Italy, the country which is chairing the G20. Environment ministers and delegates from countries including Japan, the United States, and Russia discussed steps to achieve a carbon-neutral society. The ministers disagreed on the appropriate pace of the transition from coal to clean energy for power generation. Many industrialized nations are trying to phase out coal, while developing countries are opposed to doing so. Discussions about this issue will continue at a G20 summit in October. Italy's ecological transition minister Roberto Cingolani said that after the meeting, negotiations with China, Russia, and India proved especially tough. Cingolani cited differences between the three countries on accelerating efforts to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. A Myanmar soccer player who is seeking asylum in Japan will join a professional soccer club near Tokyo. The club, YSCC Yokohama, invited Pie Liang-ong for practice earlier this month. Club officials decided to take him on as a trainee after learning that he is eager to continue playing in Japan. The 27-year-old goalkeeper arrived in May with Myanmar's national team for World Cup qualifier matches. Before the first match, he flashed the three-finger salute, a symbol of resistance to the military coup. When his team returned home in June, he stayed behind because he feared persecution in Myanmar. Pie Liang-ong has been granted a 6-month permit to live and work in Japan. The club says the goalkeeper fell short of signing a professional contract with it, but it says there is still a possibility that he will be able to do so depending on his performance. Those are the stories for this hour.